you hear me going into my cabinet here. Sorry.
Going into the vault.
Yeah, I'm grabbing out of my vault of hardware. Okay, I've got two joysticks two controllers, attached. Now I'm going to move the second controller around, and you'll see now. Let's pause the game. You'll see that the event now says Gamepad 2. So this is important. If you're doing a game where you want to have 2, 3, or 4 gamepads, you need to identify the inputs. And the way to do that is to look at the event access table and then look at the descriptor field and break down the string that you get. It's going to say something like gamepad. It's going to give you a number. It's got a colon in there. I don't know why. I prefer if it didn't, because then you got to strip it out. And I'll show you that bit below. And then it tells you axis and the number. Now again, I don't need this last bit because the number is always reported as a field. But since I'm already breaking the string up, I just go ahead and break up the descriptor and then look at the individual parts. And the way I do that is I use a function that I wrote called split. Well, I didn't write it, actually. I stole it off the web. And if you want to look at the definition of split, go into common.lua towards the bottom, and you will see a piece of code here. And what it does is it takes a string, and you say, here's a string, and here is a token. Now, a token can be a colon or a space or something like that. And what you're telling this is, look at the string, find these tokens, and return to me a table of the parts of the string that are separated by these tokens. In other words, we're looking at the descriptor here, and it's gamepad space 2 colon space axis space 2. So the token here is a space. So when I call split, get this all aligned, I say, here's the string, my token is a space, return to me a table, and the table is going to contain, the first entry will be gamepad, the second will be 2 colon, the third one will be axis, and the fourth will be 2. These will all be strings. Then, if I want the axis number, I know that that's the fourth entry in the table, I can just grab it. Now, again, for simplicity's sake, I could have simply done this. I only care that the input is coming up from a controller, and I'm not treating gamepad 2 any different from gamepad 1. I could do axis.number, and let's use the toNumber function. So what I'm doing here is I'm looking at the axis number field, and I'm extracting that value. But you'll notice that my dumping function here says that's a string. So I'm using the Lua toNumber converter, and I'm converting whatever that value is into a numeric value, because I'm going to use it as an index later. So it needs to be a number. And hopefully, if I didn't make any mistakes, that should work. Let's just verify that. Okay, so that works. Now that was joystick 1, or gamepad 1. But here's gamepad 2. So as I said just a moment ago, my code that I produced for this example is not sophisticated enough to differentiate gamepad 1 from gamepad 2. It's treating both inputs as the same input. It does notice if it's a left joystick or a right joystick, but that's all it cares about. So far we've said that this is a table listener. I am grabbing the access field from the event. I'm doing some math and some string operations on it. That is string operations, not math yet. And extracting the axis number. And the reason I do that is, as I said, each axis event is for one axis. It's the X or Y axis for that joystick, and I need to know which axis that is so I can start doing something with it. The ones I care about are axis 1 and 2, but this code down here will process 1, 2, 3, and 4, just for people who want to do a little bit more later. And the way I do that is, let me find it. at the top of the file, I created a table called joystick values. This is going to be the current value or the last value of axis 1, the last value of axis 2, 3, and 4. And I'm keeping track of these so that I can get the event, store the last value, and then create a joystick event for the X and Y for joystick 1 or the X and Y for joystick 2. Okay, so at this point in the listener, we know which axis event it is, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And so I take that number and I assign the joystick value to whatever norm value is. Now let's go back up. Norm value is, it's a little bit hard to describe, but axis events can be floating point values or integer values. So you recall that I said that the joystick inputs are between -1 and 1, but that the hip or shoulder buttons are 0 to 255. And so the normalized value is a value that has been processed by the driver that is used to read the inputs from your analog device. And it's interpreted those into some kind of useful value. And that's what gets passed in to normalized value. So if we were to run this code, and if I were to, let's go ahead and print it out. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in there and run the game again with the joystick running. Hopefully I don't have any more. You can see me moving around, and I'm getting all these interesting values here. So I'm getting minus 0.47, minus 0.96, etc., etc. Or, let me go ahead and restart so I don't get killed. If I push on the, oh, you know, that's interesting. I'll be darned. This is different. Not what I was expecting. I'm currently pushing on the triggers, and in different engines I've worked with, they treated this as 0 to 255. But it looks like they're giving me between 0 and 1. So the left trigger is completely on, all the way pressed down, or all the way up. So 0, and then I had a little bounce back. So interesting. Okay, so I just said a minute ago that the hip buttons are 0 to 255, and I'm going to have to say that I made a mistake there. That is what I get for not checking before I come on the show. I do apologize for that. Okay, so back to joysticks. Joysticks are between -1 and 1 for any particular axis. I store those values away, and that value is stored in event normalized value. So now I know the axis number, and because I know it's 1, 2, 3, or 4, I know which joystick it is, and I know the value. We're getting very close to actually being able to use this for something now. Now I have stored away the values. I started with the initial values assuming that they were 0. And now, using my throttling technique, I say, have I done an event this frame? And I got a piece of code up here that says last frame -1, enter frame, current frame is equal to the current frame +1. And what that does is this counter is going to go up every frame, and then when I do something, I'll store current frame into last frame. So, for example, let's say the game's running for a while. Current frame is at 10,000. I get an axis event. I look at last frame and I say, oh, last frame is -1, current frame is 10,000. I haven't done anything yet. I haven't done anything in the current frame. So what I will do is do some work and then store current frame and last frame. And now last frame and current frame are equal. And if I get an axis event at that point, I won't do anything. And so that's what this code right here is doing. It says if last frame is less than current frame, i.e. I haven't done anything yet, go ahead and fall into this code and immediately store the current frame into last frame. And then from then on, during this frame, no more work will be allowed by the axis event. I won't do any more. I won't. What's the word? I won't dispatch any more joystick events. But assuming that I have not done any work yet, I will say, is the axis number 1 or 2? That's the left joystick. Oh no. Is the axis number 3 or 4? That's the right joystick. Is it anything else? Okay, I don't care. I'm not dealing with the hip button, so we'll just ignore it. But assuming that it's the left joystick, I will dispatch an event using my post code, which is also in common. And I will send out an event called onLeftJoystick. I will put the axis number in, just in case I need it for some reason. And then I'll put a vector in there where I say x is equal to the current joystick value 1, and y is equal to the current joystick value 2. In other words, the x and y axes, for this particular joystick. And now I have a complete event where I can make a real decision, useful, I can do useful vector math. Everything is there that I need to do the work.